Our metal is here. We have an awesome place locally that cuts metal to custom lengths with a quick turnaround. So we just unloaded the panels and stacked them here by size. We are using tough rib panels. If you've got a low pitch roof like we do, which is a 212, make sure the panels you select are appropriate for it, which these are. So the sides are polar white, the roof panels are charcoal gray, and our trim pieces here are also charcoal gray. Now these just come in 10-foot sections. We also got screws in the matching colors of polar white and charcoal gray. We started on the back wall and our first panel is up. We're measuring about, I think it was about an inch from the top of the beam to line the panel up with. Eric cut half a rib from each first and last panel. To be honest, I don't fully remember why he did it, but I think it had something to do with how the corner trim would sit. So we're just gonna keep going down the wall. Eric starts the panel with 1 or 2 screws, and then we snap a chalk line to get straight rows, and then he finishes attaching the other screws. Now, we made a couple mistakes with the metal that I'm going to talk about throughout this video, with the first one being the first half of this back wall. The metal was getting misaligned as we were going. So there's a couple possibilities. Maybe the building wasn't perfectly square, but also the plywood was so warped that was pushing out the wall, so the wall was bowing out, which was causing the metal to bow out. So it wasn't laying the way it was supposed to. So the panel would be aligned with the marks at the top, but the ribs weren't perfectly level. So we had to step the panels up so it kept the correct alignment at the top, which doesn't look that great at the bottom, as I just pointed out. And we had to like stretch the metal at the bottom out. So we literally pulled on it as Eric put screws in and absorbed some of the bowing out that was happening at the top. It's not ideal, but we had to do this for 1 or 2 panels in order for the rest to get back on track and align correctly. In this case, it's not a huge deal. This is the back of the property and no one will ever see it. But these are things you may want to consider if you're running into a similar issue. I just wanted to show here that at the very end, Eric cut half a rib off the end. So we are moving on to the sidewalls. The metal company doesn't cut angles, or at least I don't think so. So we did have to cut the pitch into them. It's a 3-foot panel with a 212 pitch. So we measure 6 inches down on one side and make this cut for each of the 4 panels for each side. Make sure you're going in the right direction before you make this cut. These panels were really hard to hold into place, so sometimes we used clamps to help us out. Eric is cutting off half of a rib off the last panel like he's been doing. And this side wall is done. Both sides are now done and we are moving on to the front wall. The metal company cuts 36-inch lengths as the shortest, so we had to cut them down to 28.5. Eric is installing the first panel. He's using a square and measuring a distance from the top, I think about an inch, and using clamps to help with supporting the metal. To make it easier, I'm marking the panels on the ground, the screw holes 3 inches from the bottom and 1.5 inches from the top. All of the side wall panels are up and done. So exciting that we are moving on to the trim pieces. We're starting with the back 2 corner trim pieces. Eric did cut in the pitch, he cut in the angle there. After the back corner pieces are in, the drip edge will go next. I just wanted to hop up here and show you how Eric folded the end of the drip edge. I'm pointing to the fact that we're going to have gable corner trim there, although that's not what's coming up next necessarily. And then at the top, Eric used some leftover roofing nails that we had to attach the drip edge. We made kind of a big mistake on the roof panels that I am going to talk about. We already did half of it at this point, and I just wanted to show you how we got the panels up. We put a blanket down and slid the panels up so we didn't scratch our brand new trim. Before I talk about the mistake, I just wanted to say that we are doing this all from scratch with the design we created using inspiration from the internet, of course, but this isn't a DIY kit where everything is cut to length with instructions, and this is the first time we've done something like this. So if you are also measuring and figuring out everything yourself, I hope you keep this in mind. So we did not measure the roof panel length correctly because we did not account for a 1.5 inch overhang off the drip edge. So what we found was that as we were lining up the top to about 1/2 inch from the peak, we were getting 0 to 1/2 inch overhang on just the first piece, and that doesn't include any misalignment errors that might come up along the way. Now, some people might say it's fine, just go ahead and install it, and we did consider doing that, but ultimately what we did was order more metal. So we got 8 new pieces at 36 inches that we slid underneath to give us the proper overhang. I think we did a 2-inch overhang. Now, I actually think we may have accounted for it in the beginning. What we did not account for was the thickness of the rib, which is 3/4 inches, sticking beyond the wall, and then accounting for the length to be 1.5 inch overhang from that point. So like I mentioned earlier, this is the back of the building and no one will ever see it, so it's not a huge deal, but it is a bummer that we made this mistake and had to pay extra for metal. Obviously, that's not the look you want, but I just wanted to point that out in case you are also custom measuring and figuring this out for yourself. Next, we're going to work on the front corners, but I want to show you here that because of the transition from wall to no wall, there would be a gap between the post and the corner trim. So we could fill that with a 2x2 or a 2x4, but we decided to put a piece of J-mold there instead. So we're actually using PBR J-mold, which has a wider channel to fill the gap. So that's going to get installed first. Here's the J-mold installed with the Polaroid fasteners, and because we had plenty, we dry fit it first with the corner piece and marked it and then installed it. And then here the corner was cut to accommodate the bracket. And here's what it looks like with the corner trim fastened on. I think this looks really slick and is a good way to close this out. We picked up a pack of metal to metal fasteners. Luckily, they had them in gray. It's not a perfect match, but this is what we used and it did seem to work okay. I just wanted to show a closer up look at the J-mold being cut for the post bracket. So the wide side was cut except for about 3/4 of an inch, and we folded it back with hand seamers. Okay, now the front is completely done. We did the front half of the rake trim. Since we were waiting on our new metal order for the roof, we couldn't go all the way back. Since the trim pieces are only 10 foot in length, we needed a seam anyway, so we cut a 5-foot piece to install. I can't say that we knew what we were doing for closing out the peak trim to go over the rake trim. Eric came up with that fold that I didn't love, so I had to do something different for the other side. This is an ag building. I don't think anyone's going to notice that we folded them differently. I like this side a lot better. It's basically like 1-inch tabs that are just folded over. So here we installed our Oops roof panels. We just slid them under the first row of panels and did a 2-inch overhang. I found this diagram from a tough rib installation manual for overlapping the panels, and this is what we decided to follow. This is what it looks like from the inside. The shortest the metal company can do is 36 inches. If we could have gone shorter, we would have had them cut so they end at the purlin and you'd never see the seam. Yes, we could have cut them, but I think at this point we were feeling a little over it and defeated, and we just didn't want to cut all these panels. So yes, you can see it, but I don't think it's a big deal. After the roof was done, we were able to finish putting on the rake trim. In the back, it just ends. There's no fancy folding. And the building is done. It feels so exciting to have this building done, and we're really proud of ourselves. Yes, we made a couple mistakes, but we haven't done this before, so I'm not that surprised. This is a beefy building. Honestly, it is definitely overbuilt. So yeah, I just think it looks really good. Super excited. We were able to get this done in a couple months. This wraps up the video series on our loafing shed build. I hope this gave you some ideas or lessons learned that you can apply to your next project. Thanks for watching.